Joel Fitzgibbon, Josh Frydenberg, welcome to Breaking Politics. Josh Frydenberg, first to you in Melbourne. There is a lot of stick out there today in coverage of the Coalition's alternative NBN plan. It's getting a fair bit of criticism, isn't it?
Absolutely not, Tim. When you announce a big policy in a contested area, it's obviously going to be debated rigorously, and we welcome that. But at the end of the day, the commentators and the public alike will recognise that the NBN policy announced by Malcolm Turnbull is more affordable, more accessible, will be rolled out faster than Labor's alternative, and will produce a better outcome for Australian taxpayers. And that's what we're interested here. Because at the end of the day, by 2016, we'll have between 25 and 100 megabits being delivered through fibre to the node, and in some cases fibre to the premises. We believe that we will be able to meet the targets by 2019. That will be accelerated to 50 megabits. And so for looking at the Labor Party's performance on this issue, where they've continuously missed their targets, I mean, let's not forget that in 2010, they said that by June this year, they would have reached 1.3 million homes. Well, they're actually under 100,000 homes as we currently sit here and talk about it. So they're completely missing their targets. They've not capped or funded their policy. It's going to cost up to $90 billion plus. Our policy total expenditure is at $29 billion, and that's important because the typical Australian family, Tim, the typical Australian family has massive constraints on their budget. They need to meet their education expenses and their health expenses and their mortgage repayments and their electricity bills.
Joel, isn't it true that the problems that seem to be occurring with the government's NBN, its cost and its delays, are really your biggest headache? You've got the faster plan, but it's got problems.
Tim, what Josh just said is that while his new policy has come under some criticism, we shouldn't be concerned that because people will work out in the end that it's a great scheme. Well, that's not my experience with public policy. Something as complex as this is usually well received early on until they work out what all the faults are. And I think that over time, people will work out this is the Walmart version for broadband. It's cheaper. It will probably do the job for the time being, but it will be of poorer quality and is not likely to last as long. And last as long in this case means that as time goes on, his policy won't keep pace with the demands of the consumers or the technologies of the day. This is a cheaper, nastier version. My main objective in life is to make sure that all Australians, no matter where they live, including in places, regional areas like my own electorate, have access to broadband at the same price and broadband of the same quality. And that's what our policy delivers. That's not what Tony Abbott's policy delivers.
But what about those graphs that Malcolm Turnbull was showing us yesterday of the original promises in terms of the rollout of Labor's broadband and the delivery today and the gap between them, which is just so vast? It's gone nowhere near as fast as Australians had hoped, has it?
Well, they're Malcolm Turnbull's graphs, and you can produce all sorts of graphs. You know the old saying, lies, damn lies, and statistics. And, of course, a huge project like this, a bigger project than the Snowy River scheme, certainly a bigger project than the Sydney Harbour Bridge, will suffer delays from time to time. We're in the hands of the contractors who are rolling out the project. But it is very, very clear that we have the superior policy at an affordable cost.
And Josh Frydenberg, it's true, isn't it, that if you're going to rely on the copper last mile to so many Australian homes, that as much as you talk about theoretical speeds, it's going to be slower than the alternative offered by Labor. It's got to be, hasn't it?
It's going to be effective. I mean, that's the most important point here, and it's going to be affordable. As I was saying, Tim, the Australian family has lots of different calls on their budget. They're not going to buy the most expensive car and put it in the garage and leave money to pay for other things. Governments are the same. We have lots of competing demands on our budget, and we've chosen what we believe to be an affordable and effective policy, which will give much faster broadband. I mean, we're talking broadband speed. We're talking 25 megabits per second, more than 5 times the current speed, and increasing to 50 megabits by 2019. And we will deliver that on time, unlike the Labor Party, with its lack of a rigorous cost-benefit analysis and its failure to meet timetables.
Joel Fitzgibbon, the boat off Geraldton, what does this say about our border security in Australia?
Well, it was certainly a surprise to those two guys in the dinghy, Tim, who first spotted the vessel coming into Geraldton. Look, I'm not sure it says a lot. It's only the second time since 2008 a boat has managed to arrive very close to the mainland. It doesn't necessarily say anything about our border protection policy. And if those in the opposition want to criticise the Defence Force and Customs and others who have control of the reconnaissance, well, they can do so. But the reality is it's a big ocean. And from time to time, boats will and have slipped through the net. It doesn't say anything about the border protection policy per se.
And how should these asylum seekers now be treated? Given that the government hasn't formally excised the mainland, so therefore it appears at a legal level the usual route for asylum seekers is not open to you.
Well, they should be treated like any other asylum seeker who, for example, reaches Christmas Island, in my view. But let's make the point that these were Sri Lankans, and it was interesting to read that the two guys that first spotted them suddenly embraced a different attitude to asylum seekers, having had a face-to-face encounter. One of them said that, generally speaking, in the past he would have them turned back, but his attitude changed when he learned, of course, the plight of these people. But it's also interesting that they are from Sri Lanka, and we've not been turning boats back, Tim. We've been putting lots of economic refugees back on planes and sending them back on to their homeland. Far more efficient, of course, than putting them on a boat or turning around a boat, which may or may not make it back to the point from which they came. So we're doing all these things, Tim, and they should be considered and tested as refugees, and if they're not refugees, genuine refugees, they should be sent back to Sri Lanka.
Josh Frydenberg, is this a border security issue or is it not a border security issue?
It's a clear border security issue, Tim, and Joel is trying to dodge the real issue here, which is that there has been a major breach of our border security measures. It's no surprise that it's happened under this government because there's been more than 35,000 unauthorised arrivals on hundreds and hundreds of boats, and our system is at breaking point. We've had a failure to secure international agreements, we've had cost blowouts, and we've had tragic deaths at sea. All has occurred on this government's watch, and as Tony Abbott has said, John Howard inherited a problem and he found a solution. These guys have inherited a solution and created a problem, and it's just not working.
Last question to you both. A brief answer, if you would, on the question of China. Has Julia Gillard, in her leading her delegation to China over recent days, achieved a major breakthrough in securing year-on-year meetings with the Chinese leadership? First to you, Josh Frydenberg.
Look, this is a positive development and I welcome it, but at the end of the day, there has been a lack of visitation to China by the Labor government, both in Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard's time. I mean, since June 2008, we've only had one, and now this is the second Australian Prime Ministerial visit. Compare that with Germany, for example, where the Chancellor Merkel goes nearly twice a year with significant delegations. So while I welcome this, I still think there's a lot of work to do with our Chinese friends and partners in, for example, furthering the free trade negotiations, which started in 2005 and still are not concluded, unlike the New Zealanders who started their negotiations for an FTA in 2005 and concluded in 2008. So, John Howard and Alexander Downer bequeathed to the Rudd and to the Gillard governments a wonderful legacy in terms of Australia's strong relationship with China and our strong alliance with the United States. Unfortunately, we haven't seen those standards upheld by this government.
Joel Fitzgibbon, a foreign policy triumph for the Prime Minister in China or not?
Oh, the Prime Minister has done an excellent job forging stronger relationships with China. This is critical to us. The whole world, of course, is watching. So it not only improves our relationship with China, but it improves our standing in the international community. And the secret to better relations with China is openness and transparency. And the more we're talking with one another, the more we're, for example, as she's suggested, doing military exercises together and understand one another, the better things will be, the better the relationship will be, and a more stable and prosperous place the region will be. But of course, it's very, very good for our economic ties as well.
Joel Fitzgibbon in the Hunter Valley, Joshua Frydenberg in Melbourne. Grateful as always to have you on the program.
Thanks, Tim.
It's a pleasure, Tim. Thanks, Josh.